Hey everyone, welcome back to Miniature Painting 101, a series of videos where I teach you all about painting miniatures from start to finish and everything in between. This is part 60! Can't believe we're already at part 60, non-metallic metal silver. This is my first of a couple videos that will focus on non-metallic metal silver, specifically creating a dusted appearance with them. So let's start off with what is non-metallic metal? For those who are new to painting, basically it's using non-metallic colors, grays to substitute for silvers and browns for golds to emulate metallics, but you don't get the shininess of the paint. The pros, it really looks good if it's done well, and it really does show painting talent, so it's typically used in painting competitions. Most Games Day competitions will have non-metallic metal Necrons, for example, and it typically shows painted to a higher standard. But there are downsides. Number one, it's kind of hard to master. It's one of those relatively easier to learn techniques, but really hard to make it look really nice. Number two, it only works from a single angle. Metallic paints reflect the light source when they hit them, so they're easy to, they're relatively easy to keep an appearance around the entire model. However, you have to create that appearance when using non-metallic metals. You have to simulate the light hitting the model, and since light can only hit it from a certain point, it only really works from a single angle. So it's typically used for a lot of show miniatures, but in games, you'll notice that not many people use non-metallic metals for an entire army, for example. There are several keys to painting non-metallic metal on miniatures. First of all, you have to have a great gradient of colors to represent the light source hitting the miniature. Without it, it just looks really flat and doesn't create that non-metallic metal appearance. Number two, you actually have to do a pretty good job at matching the colors to the metallics. So I'll be talking about how to do that in this video. And number three, this is kind of just my thing, but certain people like to really have texture, like to emulate the metal texture, like on silver, brushed silver, which I'll be showing today sometimes, and the other people like to do just very nice gradients up to the color. So today I'll be doing textures, and in future videos I'll be doing the gradient. So today we'll be painting non-metallic metal on this black primed Necron warrior, since the perfect model show non-metallic metal on. And as I mentioned, he's primed black because I treat non-metallic metal very similar to how I treat normal metal. So in normal metal, I'd be using lead belcher, iron breaker, and rune fang steel. But as I mentioned, we got to use grays to emulate those silvers. So the first thing I do is I'm going to take my administratum gray and figure out where in the spectrum does it fall. It's way too light to be lead belcher. It's kind of too light to be iron breaker, but it's too dark to be rune fang steel. So essentially, it falls somewhere in between iron breaker and rune fang steel, as you can see here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use black and white. Black to bring the color down to the lead belcher and a little bit to the iron breaker, and then white to simulate the rune fang steel. And that's what we're going to use today to do our non-metallic metal silver. Gray, black, and white, just to do about 50 shades of gray and emulate these colors. So we'll start off with a 1-to-1 mix of administratum gray and abaddon black. I did thin it down, as always. I always thin down my paints with a little bit of medium. And I'm just going to give a nice coat over the entire miniature. And as you can see, this is a really good match for the lead belcher color. So we're going to get our nice foundation onto the model, and then we're going to treat it kind of similarly as we normally would for metallics anyway, to simulate that nice texture, the brushed texture on metallics. As I mentioned, I'm just getting a nice coat, and after a single coat, if you're not happy with, you don't have perfect coverage, feel free to do a second coat over the areas that are perhaps lacking. And just make sure you get a nice solid foundation for your grays before proceeding to the shades. So now that it's completely base coated, we're just going to look at it. As you see, it's nice, and it's actually starting to look, it does look silver because gray is obviously close to silver. So now we're going to apply a shade, just again the recesses, give it that darkness, and also this will create the framework for our brushing effect that we're going to to emulate the metallics. So we're going to give it a non-oil shade. I did water it down slightly. I didn't want the recesses to be too extreme, but I just want to give it a nice non-oil shade. Make sure it's completely dry before proceeding to the highlights, of course. And I'm just getting over the entire miniature. So the goal is to emulate metallics, but to not have the metallic pigments. So now that it's dry, you gotta figure out where your light source is hitting, because this is the important part. We gotta simulate the light source hitting the miniature, and this creates that reflection of light off the metallic surface, for example. So we're gonna choose the light source hitting it from above and in front. So the light source is basically my eyes hitting the miniature. And that's what we're gonna tell the story. Basically, you're gonna tell the person who's looking at the model where the light source is hitting relative to the miniature. So now I'm gonna dry brush to create that nice metallic brush texture, but I'm gonna dry brush from that angle, and I'm gonna focus on the parts of the model that would be showing from that angle. So as you can see, like the tops of the knees would be showing from that angle, and light source would be hitting it, but not much between the top of the knee and the body. So I'm gonna ignore those parts. And on the back, I'm just gonna dry brush a little bit as well. I like dry brush because I want to bring up the textures of the back part. So once again, we'll examine the model and focus from the front and above. And I'm going to now do a 1-to-1 mix of Administratum Gray and White Scar. The previous one was just Administratum Gray. And once again, dry brush parts from that angle. And I'm going to focus more upward parts in this time because because the upward parts would be more susceptible to being hit by the light source. So now we're building up the nice grays on the top part of the miniature. And once again, we're just getting in that nice dusted appearance to simulate, the brushed metal. I'm just doing a little bit on the back once again because light source would be reflecting in, and also it would just be, just bring up the nice details in the back, but I'm not focusing much on the back, as you can see. Just want to bring out some nice details, give a little bit of a brushed appearance, and also just give it a little bit of more texture. And that's the first part, and then all I'm going to do is just to tidy up, make sure everything has a nice, consistent appearance. And that's the first highlight up with the Administratum Gray mixed with White Scars. And then I'm going to add more White Scars to the mix to make it a 1-to-2 ratio, Administratum Gray to White Scar. And I'm going to repeat this process just on the very top parts of the miniature. Once again, just building up a nice gradient of grays and giving them that nice dirty dusted appearance that metallics, especially for Necrons, are kind of known for. Once again, I'm going to focus my dry brushing at that correct angle and just hit the parts, the very upward parts of the model, just to give it a little more detail, bring out the lines, and that's it. So this is how to do a brushed non-metallic appearance. So essentially all you're doing is a lot of shades of gray, and you got to focus on where the light source is hitting. So now we're telling the person that the light source is hitting from above and in front, because on the back part of the miniatures, you notice it's darker, right? The light source is hitting from in front, darker on the back. Makes sense. You can do the same thing on the back, and that way when you turn the model, it tells the same story, but it depends on what you want to do. Both are acceptable. So thank you very much for watching this episode of Miniature Painting 101. And stay tuned for part 61, which is just around the corner, next week as always. But if you can't wait for next week, check out the Warp. Click on the link for a free 14-day trial to my premium YouTube channel, where not only will we get to see the next 6 months worth of Miniature Painting 101 episodes, you'll get to see over 50 start to finish painting tutorials, an Airbrush 101 series, battle reports, face-off episodes. It's just some awesome wargaming content, so go ahead and check out the Warp. I think you'll love it. Until next time, this is Jay saying, happy painting, everyone.